Greetings everyone out there in the Causiverse, and welcome to CostumeTrek. I'm Nola.
And I'm Connor.
And today we're going to do a quick toot on how to cast a full bust.
For those of you who don't know, a bust is a statue from shoulders to head.
And Connor is our guinea pig. With us is special guest tutor Chris Flood.
We started off by wrapping Connor's head with plastic wrap to keep his hair from catching in the plaster. You can also use a bald cap for this. Then we coated his chest and face with petroleum jelly to act as a mold release.
So I'm going all the way down here because we're going to do basically from here up. So we're going to actually probably bring it down even a little lower just to be on the safe side.
So what we're doing here is we're just pre-cutting the plaster gauze into strips and larger pieces so that we're prepared when we want them to cover his head.
Cut more gauze than you think you'll need because it sucks to get caught in the middle of application and need more. We bought 3 packages for this project.
I would say go ahead and start with
This.
making the border of where we're going to split the 2 pieces.
Oh, we're going to do it like that?
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, I thought we'd cut it.
The cut seam we're going to make thinner than
Right,
the
so
rest
it's
of
easier to cut.
It.
What?
Next, we applied the plaster gauze, first dipping it through warm water, then applying it to Connor's head.
Yeah, up where the up
Having,
on top.
yeah.
Try and get it tighter to his head because the plastic is
Oh, it's bubbling.
pushing it up. So we make sure we overlap all the straps so that they hang on to each other. I'm going over your mouth now.
We made sure to do at least 4 layers over his entire head to ensure that the mold would be able to support the plaster that would be poured into it.
Yeah, one of the hardest parts I find with this is making sure that you do have all the coverage that you want, because once you get the first layer on, you can't tell the difference really between 1 layer and 4 layers.
Right.
It's getting warm.
That means it's setting up.
Yep. If you touch the plaster, it's hot.
Well, it's not going to get hot. That's the beautiful thing about the plaster gauze. It doesn't get hot. Whereas if we did straight plaster, which I've seen some people do, it does get hot.
No.
No, it can actually burn you.
And when you're finishing up, always make sure that you leave enough plaster strips so that when we take this apart, later when it's off him, we'll plaster strip it back together. So Chris put extra in the back.
Where the shoulder blades come together, you get a cleft in there that tends to be a weak point.
So now we have to wait a few
3
minutes.
layers that I can see. Yeah, there's no squish there.
But it's already starting to harden up. So how long are we gonna wait? Shouldn't be too long. It's reasonably.
There's still a lot of heat coming from it.
Yeah. So you want to wait till it's basically cool?
Till it's cooled off a little, yeah. I mean, it's not a super lot of heat, but you can definitely feel it.
Yeah, it's
And you can feel the
it's starting
wetness.
to cool here.
But you can feel the wetness in it.
Oh yeah.
The plaster gauze takes about 30 minutes to set up. Once the gauze hardened, we marked out where we were going to cut the mold to remove it from Connor's head.
All right, so it's been about another 10 minutes.
10 minutes, yeah.
And so we're gonna start taking him, cut it off.
Using a pair of surgical safety scissors, we carefully cut along the seam.
So note to self, beforehand, figure out a whole variety of hand signals so you can communicate while they're inside. All right, how are we?
All right, we're good.
All right.
Oh, God, it's so bright.
Yeah.
Don't open your eyes.
Shut up.
You survived.
Look at the inside.
Freedom!
Free! So Connor's gonna go get in the shower now.
What's really funny is that when I was in there, I could feel myself detaching from the mold. So I was like in my own skin just moving around. It was cool.
Mm-hmm.
Ouch.
Han Solo on carbonate.
Yeah, basically.
Now that we got it off of his head, we need to go in. We got some voids in here that we need to fill in. Otherwise, when we do fill this with plaster, that'll grab onto our positive cast and cause a nightmare getting it apart. So all we're gonna do here is just mix up a little bit of plaster to fill it in with. You don't want to use the gauze because then you're adding too much bulk. You want to have it fairly liquidy because it will actually, when you start laying thin layers in here, it'll start setting up pretty quick, especially with the brush. And if you wind up getting too much of a buildup and it hardens before you can knock it down, you can always come back with sandpaper and smooth it out.
Once the inside surfaces were smoothed out, we reconnected the two halves of the mold using more of the plaster gauze.
So we're going to let this dry overnight, so make sure the plaster is completely dry, and then we can go ahead and set it up to pour a positive cast.
Yay!
Yay!
The next day, after the plaster gauze mold had fully cured,
All right, so what we're doing is we are going to be putting sand in the bucket to help support the weight of this so that when we fill this with plaster of Paris, it doesn't just collapse. And we've actually got a lot of thickness here. Honestly, we could probably do it without the sand, but it's better to be safe than sad.
then we used more petroleum jelly to act as a mold release. Now it was time to mix the plaster. We used 2 parts plaster, 1 part water, and mixed it until smooth.
It feels
yogurt.
disgusting. Actually, no, it's lighter than yogurt.
Lighter.
I think I got some in my eyebrows.
Next came the pour, and kicking the bucket to get all the air bubbles out.
So after pouring the mold, we let it set for 24 hours, and we're gonna take this mold and cut it open and see what we got.
To remove the mold, I basically peeled it off the plaster casting. When the final piece came off, there was a problem.
Oh, yeah, that's. Oh, the chin's totally. Yeah, damn it.
We failed to get a major bubble out of the chin area. After cleaning up the bust, to fix the chin, I took the face piece of the cast, filled it with a small amount of plaster, then reapplied it to the face of the bust.
So I've waited about 15 minutes for this chin to dry, and now I'm gonna peel it back and see what we have. Hey, you guys want to come here and check this out? It's kind of a disaster, but kind of worked at the same time.
After some sanding and minor cosmetic work, I have a bust of my head that I can use to pattern hats, cowls, helmets, and headpieces for any character I can think of.
If you want to experience the world one costume at a time with us,
Subscribe!
ring the bell,
Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
and check out our website, CostumeTrek.com.
See you next time.